Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today, I want to talk about another Infinity book. This is the Ariadna book. That's one of the main factions in the Infinity RPG. And like most of the Infinity faction books, this one is really great. Also, like most of the Infinity Faction books, it does not include the stuff that's already in the core book, which makes the book, read on its own, feel a little bit incomplete because the basics have already been included in the core book, which is this big, huge thing and has a ton of information. And so there are certain things in this book that aren't going to make any sense to you if you haven't already read the Ariadna section in the core book. But I think overall that's probably the best decision. It meant that they weren't repeating information and that everything in this book is brand new and packed with cool stuff. So anyway, let's talk about Ariadna. So Ariadna, of all of the Infinity factions, is the most inherently silly. Let's get that out of the way. That out of the way right up front. It's awesome and it's very cool, but it clearly is also kind of a throw everything rad into a bucket kind of a faction. A lot of the factions are based on very specific Earth culture stereotypes, I guess is the way to say that. So you've got stuff like Yujing, which is the Asian faction, and you have Hak Islam, which is the Middle Eastern faction. And they're all more deep than that, and they have got some really significant and impressive world building in them. But they are also clearly based on some ideas and some concepts and some visuals that they wanted to translate into their science fiction game. Similarly, Ariadna is the Special Forces faction. And so it is, well, I guess the best way is just to describe the history of Ariadna. The human sphere, the Infinity role-playing game takes place in a section of many different planets that's called the human sphere. One of those planets, they sent a ship called Ariadna to colonize it, and then it was lost. That wormhole closed, things went wrong, and for several centuries, there was no contact with Ariadna and the outside world. This turned out to be a super bad thing for a lot of reasons. Not only are they far behind the rest of the world in terms of technological development, but also the world they landed on, which they called Dawn, is full of a bunch of really terrifying animals. It's a hostile environment. It is not easy to survive there. And there is, in fact, even a sentient alien species that lives there called the antipodes. And the antipodes are essentially giant, terrifying wolf people. And so the poor colonists on the Ariadna ship trying to settle Dawn, trying to survive there with no backup and no help from the outside world, this turned out to be a super hard thing to do. And everyone had to just fight and scramble, and the fact that they are still alive at all is amazing. When a generation or so ago, when the rest of the human sphere reconnected with the planet Dawn, they were shocked to find anybody alive there at all. So that colony ship had a group from France, a group from Scotland, a group from the United States, and a group from Russia. And those four spent those few centuries fighting kind of against each other as well as against everybody else. Sometimes they banded together in the face of larger threats. Sometimes they were doing a lot of infighting and trying to, see who could control the entire colony and which ones wanted to just separate out and be their own thing. And so there's a lot of political infighting in addition to the actual fighting with the giant scary wolf monsters. So you get a lot of that, and the result is, as you can see here, and let's just zoom in on the cover there, the result is a lot of kind of special forces, wilderness survival kind of vibe to it. They're lower tech. Most of their equipment is not hackable. They don't have the Maya net and the kind of augmented reality patina that so many of the other factions have. What they do have instead are a lot of the things that we think of today as being part of the awesome commando force and special ops forces of the world's militaries, and notably, yes, of French, Russian, American, U.S., and Scottish militaries. Why is Scotland in there? Because kilts are awesome. And so there is actually a fantastic, awesome backstory to Ariadna. In practice, what that means is that there are a lot of different, like, people are wearing kilts and they're fighting with claymores and they're high-tech kilts, but still, here's a wolf man with a giant two-handed sword in the middle of this city, and they have a backstory for that explains it, but it still is clearly just awesome things in a bucket. And so I love it. I love Ariadna. I think their look is great. I think wolf people wearing kilts and fighting with claymores is awesome. I love the little cowboy dudes with bows and arrows, and there's all these kind of Spetsnaz special forces running around and all these different things. It's great, and I think it's really cool. So, but I do recognize that there is an inherent silliness to the giant Scottish Russian werewolf secret USA commando faction. Okay, but let's get over that and let's talk about this. So let's talk first about the antipodes. I do want to show you this. Let's show you what an antipode looks like. Okay, antipode is a word that means the exact opposite of a thing. Okay, and so this is a shot from the minis game, and these are the antipodes. Antipodes are really fascinating. They're essentially they are to wolves what human beings are to apes, right? They're the sentient, evolved version. They're still fairly primitive. I guess they're more like what a Neanderthal or a caveman would be to an ape. But anyway, what really makes them interesting to me is that they have a trinary consciousness, meaning that one antipode by itself is essentially as smart as a really smart dog. Two get together and they become a little smarter. Three get together, and then through a combination of light and pheromones and a form of just straight up psychic communication, they become one complete personality. And so if you actually can play antipodes as NPCs and bad guys, you can also play them as characters. And if you are an antipode character, you have to have two other antipodes with you, either as minions to back you up, or the other player characters. You could have three people in your group that are all playing antipodes. And I think that is such a neat concept for an alien species and for a character class. And this book does have some cool information on what it's like to play a single personality distributed across three giant scary wolf monsters. This other human in the middle is called a loup-garou, and that is kind of a human that is trained to teach and control the dog people, the wolf people. And there's two other kinds of wolf people, and the loup-garou deals with all of them. And so in the minis game, if you're going to bring the antipodes into your game, they come with a human who's like their sergeant who tells them what to do. In the game, you don't need one of those, but it is one of the career options to be a loup-garou. One of the other cool things about the antipodes is that they have a genetic virus that can be delivered through their bite. And this is where you get more into the werewolf idea. And so within their own species, one of the ways that a trinary group will reproduce is that you will have a pregnant female, and then both of the males in the trinary, if there are two, they can be in any combination, will physically bite that female, and then that will mess with the DNA of the unborn child and make it kind of genetically connected to everybody. And that makes sense, I think, for a trinary species, that you can actually share genetic material that way within a whole community. Unfortunately, for the human settlers who are trying to survive on Dawn, that bite can also affect humans. And so there is a hybrid species called the dogface that if a pregnant human female gets bitten by one of these antipodes, then their child will have that DNA. It's called the cuckoo virus. And it will get in and it will alter the DNA of that child and make them a werewolf. So that is where we get this picture, okay? So the dog face, these two gentlemen on the outside, they look like normal humans while being slightly, bigger and brawnier. But then they have the possibility of going full Hulk out wolf here, which is what these other two models are for. And so this is another good NPC option or player character option to be a dog face. And this comes with a lot of penalties. It comes with a lot of upfront costs. You are kind of a physical combat monster and very capable, but a lot of other things become very difficult for you, including that kind of blood fury that turns you into a wolf in the first place, as well as, of course, all the social penalties that come from the fact that the people around you aren't necessarily going to trust you because they know that you're actually an alien hybrid who could turn into a wolf. Now, if the dog faces interbreed with regular humans, then you get what's called a wolver. This guy in the middle is a wolver. These are just humans on the outside. And the wolver can't transform, so they don't have a human phase and a dog phase. They're just always in that kind of hybrid middle ground. And so they can't control their rage as well. They can't transform their shape as well, and they are sterile in addition because of the way the crossbreeding works. But another cool player character and or villain NPC option there. So those are the three kinds of the wolf people, and I think they're great. This is also nice because you can see these dudes with kilts on and stuff. So hooray for those! Anyway, the antipodes are really just one small part of the Ariadna faction, but they're one of the most high-profile ones, and so I wanted to make sure to show it. Let's go all the way down here to chapter 6, which is when it talks about the antipodes and the different kinds of antipodes. Again, this book doesn't include the basics of the cuckoo virus and stuff like that. You get that out of the core book, but you need the core book to play this anyway, so there you go. That's a wolver who's terrorizing some people. There's all these different things. There's a dog bowl, which is like a sport. It's a blood sport that they play. And if you want to play as an antipode or a dogface or a wolver, they have all of those rules. And you can see here, there's kind of slightly modified versions of the full character creation process, including all of these, different event tables. They have very different tribe tables. They have completely different education tables. And then they've got a whole set of careers that are unique to them. Some of the dog faces can have normal careers, and some of the wolvers can as well, though it's rare because of all the social problems that come with that. But antipodes in particular have their own careers that they just have to deal with, and so they've got all of these very specific dog-blooded, wolf-blooded character classes, which is awesome. You know what else we have in this book? The previous chapter, chapter 5, includes full character customization options for Ariadna characters. The core book still applies, and the core book still has plenty of things that work for Ariadna. But if you want to be something very specific here, you can. It has a homeland table there, several homeland tables. It has all of these very specific Ariadna event tables, because if you grow up on Ariadna, things are likely to be different. And this is true across all of the faction books. The Nomad book, the Aleph book, the Hakazlam, Yujing, Pano, they all have their own tables so that you can really customize your character and your background to fit into everything else. And so this is where you get things like the hard case, which is that cowboy-hatted you know, bow and arrow kind of backwoods hunter character that I think is super awesome. They've got all this stuff in here. There's the loop guru. So anyway, tons and tons of new information. You know what else we have? Let's go one chapter further back. Gear. Ariadna is valuable to the human sphere because it has a mineral called cesium. And cesium is one of the strongest metals in the human sphere and pretty much makes the best armor around. And you can use it to do a lot of interesting things with weapons. That's how you have the big kind of two-handed werewolf claymores that can cut through robots and stuff. It's because it's all made out of cesium. Cesium is super valuable, which is why everybody wants it, which is why Ariadna is a, you know, the planet of dawn is a battleground. And so there's a lot of specific information here on the vehicles that they have and the equipment, the armor and the weapons. And in typical Infinity style, these all go into incredible detail, and you've got price lists for them somewhere in here. Anyway, oh, yep, there you go. A werewolf with a kilt and a claymore. And so this is great. There's a good chapter at the back that has adversaries, so that if you want to, you know, be able to fight not just the monsters like an antipode or a giant brown bear, but specific things like, let's find them, the Dog Bowl players, the actual, come on, show us some of these humans here. All of these are specific NPC profiles that you can put into a game, and then even some named NPCs, people who are core to the experience on Ariadna and that might be valuable to interact with in some way. So that's great. All of that is kind of the really cool player-facing and statistical information, but I think the bulk of what you're going to get is here in Chapter 2. If you want to have a character who comes from Ariadna, or if you want to include Ariadna in your game, this chapter is just absolutely exhaustive in the detail that it presents and makes available to you. So, anyway, this book is wonderful. It is packed with information, absolutely just overflowing with it. And I think that it is going to be a really valuable resource. If you like Infinity, the odds are good that you already know which faction you love the most. And odds are also very good that one of those factions is Ariadna, because while I did introduce it as kind of inherently silly, it's also, I think, unabashedly and inarguably awesome. Whether you are the backwoods hunter or some kind of special ops character or an actual werewolf of some kind, just the idea, the story of these people who had to survive on their own in an unforgiving wilderness, and now they're banding together to fight against the much larger, super high-tech enemy that found them and then wanted to steal all their resources away. It's just a great faction. It's a cool setting, and I think it's awesome. And this book presents it really well. So, thank you for watching. I hope you get a chance to try Infinity, because it is a very cool game that rewards taking the time to get to know the incredibly rich setting. And Ariadna is a good part of that. So, I will see you on my next review.